Great.
Today's webinar is going over, understanding simplified acquisition procedures. And before we begin, I'd like to do a quick sound check just so that I know that you can hear me okay. And you can do that by raising your hand inside the GoToWebinar application by clicking that high five icon on the bottom left-hand part of your screen. Great. Thank you, everyone that raised their hand. I appreciate it. My name is Christina Collins, and I am the training facilitator for the Virginia Apex Accelerator. The Virginia Apex Accelerator is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the Department of Defense and is a sponsored program of George Mason University. If you're a Virginia-based business and not signed up as a client, please consider taking advantage of our free one-on-one counseling services. And we do offer a subscription bid match service available to all of our clients for a nominal fee. And I recommend taking a look at that sample profile on our website. I also encourage you to familiarize yourself with our website, especially our resources page, and our URL is virginiaapex.org. If your business is based outside of Virginia, you can take advantage of your local Apex Accelerator centers. There are over 90 of them throughout the country, and you can find your local office at the Apex Accelerators website at apexaccelerators.us, or you can check at the bottom of our locations page on our site. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at apex@gmu.edu. And before we begin today's webinar, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. The slides for today's training will be available inside the Neosera eCenter where you signed up. It'll be an attachment under class documents. You will need to be logged in to see them, so please use that auto login link from your reminder email. The slides will be visible as soon as your attendance is taken today. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the questions window and not the chat box. And for those of you joining us by phone only and do not have a screen in front of you, please email us at apex@gmu.edu to let us know that you have attended today. Lastly, this is a live webinar, and it is being recorded for internal purposes only at this time. Today's webinar presenter is William Randolph. William is the federal government as a contract specialist in 1995 after graduating from college and an enlistment in the United States Navy. And during his federal career, William reached the highest level of civil service by being selected into the Senior Executive Service in 2009. And in August 2016, William retired from the federal government with over 26 years of public service. And after retirement, he joined an acquisition consulting firm as a senior consultant and leadership coach and facilitator. In 2009, William founded Think Acquisition, a government contracting firm focused on increasing the individual and team effectiveness of all participants in the government contracting space in the areas of acquisition, contracting, program management, and leadership. He has to date consulted with over 20 government agencies and organizations and over 40 industry clients in the areas of acquisition strategy, program management, and strategic business development. William is also a decorated United States Navy veteran, a David Packard Excellent Acquisition Award winner, a Federal Executive Institute graduate, and the recipient of the Navy Marine Corps Meritorious Civil Service Medal, and is now the founder of Micromarket.co, an online marketplace for government micro purchase services. And with that, I'm going to turn over the webinar over to William. Thank you, William, for your time today, and thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. It's my pleasure. And I'm really excited about the content as well. So we want to dive in and make sure that we use all of the time that we have available to talk about the concept and navigating simplified acquisition procedures. So let's dive in. A little bit about my background. Ms. Collins gave you some of it earlier. So I just want to touch on, just to let you know that this journey started with military service, and in 1995, I started in the federal government as a contract specialist. And throughout that journey, I've had various assignments, and micro purchasing and simplified acquisition purchasing were major components of that activity across all of the agencies and across all of the opportunities that I've had. So just want to give you a little bit of background there. So let's talk about winning big with smaller dollars. Winning big with smaller dollars. And this is about the simplified acquisition procedures. $250,000. You're going to be hearing that word. You're going to be hearing that number quite a bit. 250,000. So let's dive in on even further. So these are the webinar topics that I want to make sure that we cover today. Is understanding simplified acquisition procedures, identifying how SAP accelerates the small business entry into the market, and then some tactics to pursue SAP opportunities, simplified acquisition procedure opportunities. So let's set the stage a little bit. The federal government buys in thresholds. So everything from 1 cent to $10,000 is considered the micro purchase threshold, usually operated and executed via the government purchase card. The next level up, anything from $10,000 up to $250,000. Anything over $10,000 is the simplified acquisition threshold, $250,000. And that really is the line where the focus it is hyper focused. The activity is hyper focused on government contracting to small businesses. After that, it becomes somewhat unrestricted. There's a few nuances here and there, but generally it becomes unrestricted. So this is where all the activity happens that is not focused on small businesses exclusively. So today we're going to talk about the simplified acquisition threshold, simplified acquisition procedures, SAT, threshold with the T, P with the procedures. And this is where we're going to focus today. Colleagues, first I want to just set the stage. If you've ever read the book or heard of the book, Who Moved My Cheese? In the government contracting space, oh my gracious, the cheese is moving. The cheese is absolutely moving. The old ways of doing things seem so distant. The levels of outreach and engagement seem so distant. The levels of contract activity seems distant. The cheese is definitely moving, but the premise of the contracting process, the government contracting process, still is the same. Excuse me, still is the same. The government has needs. They issue some form of ask, RFPs, RFQs to industry. Industry bids. The government does some level of source selection. The work is awarded and performed, and then there's a contract closeout and possibly a do it all over again cycle to start if the need is still available. So while the cheese is moving, lots of things are happening, the contracting process is still the same. If you know or been exposed to anything in the government contracting arena, the government is very rules centric. Another word for it we often use is compliance focused. Okay, it's compliance focused. Therefore, you have to understand the environment that you're trying to work in, trying to operate in, trying to do business in, and this is what this webinar is all about: is increasing your levels of understanding, not only from the vendor, small business, and industry side of the house, but just give you a peek behind the curtain in terms of what the government is thinking about when they're doing small or operating in a simplified acquisition procedures environment. So colleagues, the top line theme here is this: simplified acquisition procedures serves as the procurement gateway. Okay? It's a strategy. It's a channel into government. And what they're looking for are nimble, compliant vendors, primarily small, hyper-focused on small vendors, small business vendors. But it's a channel to enter government today and a place to mature for tomorrow. Because the small business of today, okay, once a small business shows and demonstrates that they are capable of executing, then agencies, departments, offices want to make sure that they mature over time so they can do higher and bigger level work, higher level value and larger quantity of work in the future. So this is the place to enter today for growth going forward. Okay, so let's set the stage a little bit. Streamlined buying methods, SAP procedures, simplified acquisition procedures, streamlined buying methods. Those methods can be found in Part 13 of the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation. And it lays out all of the strategies and tactics and gives lots of latitude in terms of what can be accomplished under the simplified acquisition threshold $250,000. Just as the name suggests, it's simplified. The strategies are simplified. The objective, the goal is really to reduce administrative costs, improve opportunities for small business, and promote rapid delivery of procurement goods and services. That's the focus. This is the strategy at this level, at this threshold. Once contracting officers have the ability, one, to have a procurement under the threshold, then they have lots of strategies, lots of opportunity, lots of discretion. That's probably the word I was looking for. Lots of discretion in how they perform and evaluate small purchases in this area. They can use oral and written quotations. Okay. They can evaluate on price and past performance alone, only those two characteristics. And there are limited documentation. Decision for the decision, documentation for the decision, documentation for the record, and even expedited briefing capability in this space. Simplified acquisition SAP awards, simplified acquisition procedures can be awarded using the purchase card, especially at $10,000 and below. It's exclusive, but even there are some instances where the government purchase card can be used as a method of payment for dollar values greater than $10,000, but up to the simplified acquisition procedures level. Okay. Can also use purchase orders. You may have heard of those. They're like mini contracts. Okay, a little bit more than a micro purchase contract. They have some terms and conditions, but they're not the full, complete, mature complexity of a regular contract. We use the SF standard form, SF 1449. You may have heard of that. Also, blanket purchase agreement calls can be done under the SAT, under the simplified acquisition threshold, as well as task and delivery orders under IDIQs. I'm going to make a distinction between the two. Tasks are for services, delivery orders are for products, supplies. Okay. Now, the rules are very clear in FAR Part 19 that the requirements, anything that exceeds the micro purchase, so greater than 10,000 up to 250,000, that threshold, that area, that level of buying must first be set aside for small businesses. Okay. Shall. Okay. And there's only one way that those purchases at that level can find their way into the hands of large businesses. There's only one way. And that is if the government goes into the marketplace, does market research, and determines that there aren't small businesses that are capable of doing the work. This is why engagement in market research activities with the government is so very important. Okay? Having an understanding of that. Now, this is where I was telling you that there are some nuances above $250,000 for certain commercial items. The simplified acquisition threshold is raised to $7.5 million inside of the United States, okay, and $15 million abroad. Okay. So think about that. Think about that. That up to 7.5 million can use these accelerated strategies, flexible, okay, simplified evaluation, prompt payments, and effective source selections. up to 7.5 million in the country and 15 million outside of the country. Okay, so let's talk some details. Why do simplified acquisition procedures, SAP procurements, matter? Why do they matter so much? One, when used appropriately, they reduce paperwork and negotiation cycles. Now, the challenge that I saw in government is that many times government teams don't utilize all of the flexibilities. They are very accustomed and comfortable with the normal, longer version strategies of procurement. So those longer strategies and tactics sometimes bleed into the simplified acquisition procedures, into those dollar values under $250,000. But I'll tell you, the value proposition here is that there is lots of efficiencies and lots of reduction in paperwork and negotiation cycles that can be achieved when the simplified acquisition procedures are used appropriately and to their furthest extent. Again, SAP is hyper focused, set asides for small businesses. This is where small businesses get to learn, enter the market, cut their teeth, if you will, okay, and then mature in the activity in the business of government contracting. And then there's nothing better, again, as a small business owner myself, there's nothing better than improved cash flow. So faster awards and faster payments tend to contribute to improved cash flow for small businesses. So let's talk about the landscape. As I mentioned earlier, FAR Part 13 is the chapter of the FAR where the simplified acquisition procedures live. Part 8, Part 12, Part 14, and Part 15 are versions of other buying channels, but even in those versions, if the dollar value is below $250,000, they can find their way into using the strategies and techniques in FAR Part 13. The goal of FAR Part 13 is streamlined buying. Okay? Anything less than the simplified acquisition threshold should be highly efficient, highly streamlined, taking out all of the more complex strategies that are necessary or used at the higher dollar values. And the value proposition here is that it's statutory. There's the Small Business Act is behind this. Okay, so the Small Business Act, which is law in this country, has the value proposition to reduce admin costs and expand small business access. So we have law behind the simplified acquisition procedures. All right, so let's talk about the thresholds again. Let's dive in just a little bit more. The premise is over 10,000 but less than 250, including commercial services and products, which may get you to 7.5 million in the United States. This is the area, this is the focus. Here's the goals. Must consider 3 quotes, must consider small businesses, and you have to consider required sources of supply first. Okay, required sources, and we're going to talk about what those are in just a moment. Must required sources of supply first. There's a hierarchy of guidance. There's a hierarchy that's associated with that. Okay. Please know, colleagues, that the simplified acquisition threshold has grown over time. There are periodical adjustments for inflation, periodic adjustments. We're actually in the middle of one right now. As we speak, we're in the middle of a periodic adjustment for inflation, for the micro purchase and the simplified acquisition threshold. Okay, if you have something close, if you have pen and paper close or something to write with, write these down. Come September 30th or into October 1st, into the new fiscal year, when we transfer out of this year into the new fiscal year, come October 1st, it is expected that the simplified acquisition threshold, okay, will move from 250,000 to 350,000. Okay, significant move, 250,000 to 350,000. A similarly situated inflationary adjustment for the micro purchase as well, from 10,000 to 15,000. Okay, almost actually a 50% increase in the micro purchase threshold. Just as an aside, the language that and the research that was used to support the this adjustment in this season suggested an additional $9 billion worth of spend will be unlocked. 9 billion with a B will be unlocked for small businesses, focused on small businesses, simply by having the inflationary adjustment to those two thresholds. Now, the current thresholds often move when there are contingency humanitarian activity. Okay, when we have emergency situations such as pandemic response was the last one where the caps increased, and we'll talk about those caps in just a moment. Okay, we'll talk about it tripled. So for the simplified acquisition, it moved from 250 to 750 in humanitarian and contingency operations, and for the micro purchase, it moved from 10,000 to 20,000. Okay. One of the things that you have to be aware of is that while the caps, the inflationary adjustments change, and the contingency humanitarian caps provide authorization for a certain level, each agency has their own regulatory guidance to 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 dictate, to state in their regulations how much of that they use. Just because it's provided at the federal level doesn't mean that every agency uses all of it. So when you are targeting client agencies to support, make sure that you have a situational awareness of what those regulatory supplements say in terms of their caps. They may or may not be equal to the federal caps during contingency or humanitarian activities. Now, one of the things you have to be highly thoughtful of in this season, in this space, is the split purchasing rule. Okay, the federal government is not allowed to break one requirement up into smaller buys to stay under the SAT or under the micro purchase threshold, either one of the thresholds. Okay, those are numbers. Those thresholds are firm for a reason. Okay, and I've seen, at least in my career, I've seen a couple of times where folks have tried to be too cute and break the requirement up, and they tend to be seen. They tend to be seen specifically because the aggregate need over time is being considered. So all you have to do is look at 6 months of activity, and if you see a interesting pattern there where activity is being broken up, something that should have been $1 million, but it was 4 $250,000 procurements, just to accelerate. Again, the simplified acquisition is fast. It's faster, so there are some motivations and incentives to go fast, but we cannot break and use the split purchasing and use split purchasing to utilize these faster strategies. And violations, when the government finds itself in a violation situation, then it has the opportunity to lead to protest and other disciplinary actions inside of government. So when you're thinking about delivering your services and delivering your products and offering your products and submitting your proposals, think about that. Position your activity, position your goods and services, your proposals in a way where you don't run afoul or you don't entice your clients to run afoul of the split purchasing rules. Okay, let's talk about set-asides. At this level, by again, purchases greater than the micro purchase and lower than SAT shall be set aside for small businesses. But the contracting officer may also identify a specific category of small business depending on what their goal needs are for the agency. Okay? They have to tell a story. They have to have proper justification for that. But even at the simplified acquisition threshold, there may be a desire to set aside a procurement for hub zone small businesses because the agency has had a challenge meeting their hub zone small business goals. So just be mindful of that, that's a viable option, not only to be set aside because it's below the SAT, but to further set aside in a category for a given socioeconomic category. There's also, colleagues, the concept of the rule of two, meaning is if there are at least two small businesses in a given category, the contracting officer may, if prompted, if an argument could be made to set it aside for a lower category, a smaller, not lower, smaller category. Instead of being for small business, maybe they set it aside for veterans. Maybe they even set it aside even further for service disabled veterans. If there is an argument that the rule of two applies at the $250,000 threshold. Okay? This is another reason why your engagement with government micro purchasing, government market research, government market research is so important, because this is how the government obtains the information to determine whether the rule of two actually applies. Okay, so that's why it's so very important to participate. Speaking of socioeconomic categories in the program order, there is a program order. There's a preference activity. Okay, at this level. Okay, at this level. Here's what I see, and here's what I'm hearing, is that in the season where there is a perceived program order in which service disabled veteran owned small businesses are moving up the preference order. It's not written in stone anywhere. It's not in any document. But what we're seeing is service disabled veteran owned small businesses and hub zone small businesses, because they are not individual characteristic based. Okay, they're not individual characteristic based. That the service disabled veteran owned and hub zones are being more perceived as being easier to not only execute but to be reviewed and approved. So there are some strategies and tactics to be available for work in this space. Please remember that all small business activity in terms of government contracting activity is driven by NAICS codes. And it's especially important for small businesses because the NAICS codes, the NAICS codes, also articulate the size standards. Okay? So whatever NAICS codes, North American Industry Classification System, those codes also, in every code has a size standard. The size standard is typically identified in one of two ways: annual revenues, average annual revenues, or number of employees. Those two pieces of information, as a result, those two pieces of information are used to identify whether something is actually can be a small business set aside. Those dollar values, those NAICS codes. And the small business certifications are driven by size standard and average annual revenues. Here's an example. My primary NAICS code 611430, education and training. That size standard is $16 million of annual revenue. Okay? I have a client that's in the man-made fibers business. They make fibers inserts for things like diapers and surgical hats, surgical gowns, booties. Their size standard is in number of employees. His size standard, the CEO of the company is my client. They have a size standard of 1,200 people, 1,200 people. Now, that doesn't seem like a small business, number of people from another people perspective, but that's the size standard. That's the size standard. And as a result of that, the company is very keen on the number of employees they have. They don't want to get anywhere near 1,200 employees. Now, they can earn as much revenue in the business as they want and still maintain a small business as long as still maintain their certification as a small business as long as they maintain the size standard of under 1,200 employees. Okay. One of the things that's very important is your profile keywords. This is the way the government searches, does market research. So making sure that your NAICS codes and size standards are recognized and stated in your dynamic small business search visibility, in your assessment, especially in your narrative, making sure that your NAICS are identified, size standards identified, recognizing and certifying that you are a small business in those categories. So make sure those keywords and NAICS codes are searchable in your DSBS. One of the things one must remember in the government contracting environment of today is that marketing and branding matters, probably more now than it ever did. In a world of websites and artificial intelligence and chat GPT, having your information in the atmosphere, in the environment, so that you can be seen when the government is looking, the marketing and branding matters a lot more now than I think than it ever had. I read an article not just a couple of days ago that says Google search is that searching in general is reducing. People aren't using Google or any other search engines. The usage is going down. They see a constant reduction in the number or the amount of Google searching that's happened. People are surmising that is a reaction to the increased usage of AI, artificial intelligence platforms and chat systems like ChatGPT or Bing or Grok, whatever the tool of choice. Is that search by itself still requires some level of analysis. Okay? Once you search, you get all the information. Then you still have to do some level of analysis when using large language models that are connected to the internet. It does the search and does the analysis and draws the conclusions for you. So it's just a natural progression to AI tools. So this just means that your presence, okay, your presence is more important now than ever before. We talked about the required sources hierarchy. I mentioned earlier that there's mandatory sources. Here is the mandatory sources strategy. Obviously, agencies should be looking at their own inventory and excesses, okay? Whatever they have in-house, they should look at that first. Federal prison industries and Ability One are next. GSA federal supply schedules, okay? Very important strategy here. In light of all that's been happening with the executive orders and the consolidation of common goods and services, I think GSA federal buying is that strategy, GSA federal supply schedule buying, GSA schedule buying, is going to be significantly more prevalent. Okay? It was already a viable tool, but it was a tool used for efficiency. Now, the federal acquisition rules are saying the strategy is GSA is now the focal point for the 10 categories of common goods and services, and that GSA is going to be doing the buying. 400 billion. That's the estimated number. We look at last year's numbers and think about the purchases that happened in the 10 category management categories. There was $400 billion of spending that was happening there. So just think about if that 400 billion is moving now to GSA. I pose to you that the schedules are going to be one of the strategies used to execute those dollars. Okay. GSA last year didn't do all of those dollars. So as a result of that, I think there's going to be additional guidance coming out and additional strategies around the schedules. What that means is I think there's going to be fewer open market opportunities. So while I think there will still be some GSA for the common goods and services, again, check out those 10 categories of common goods and services, that anyone that's going to be in the government contracting business, okay, for the long term should at least be on the journey to acquiring a GSA schedule. That's just my opinion, but I think it's an informed opinion based on reading the tea leaves that we see today. All right, Ability One and Unicore, remember, mandatory sources. Okay, must look there first. Okay, this is what's happening. This is the peek behind the curtain. Inside of the government must look at the mandatory contracting officers, contract specialists must look at the mandatory list first. Ability One and Unicore are up top on that list. Okay, if they aren't available, if they aren't viable, which may be the case, depending on what you see, depending on what the requirement is and what's available in the marketplace from Ability One and Unicore, they may not be viable. But just know that they have to make a piece of paper. They have to tell a story. If it's not viable, someone has to tell a story that it's not viable. So as you are thinking about marketing to your government agencies, I would encourage you to demonstrate your uniqueness. Okay? It's very important to demonstrate your uniqueness to the government of your goods and services so that they have a good story to tell if they want to pursue your goods and services in lieu of Ability One and Unicore, which may or may not have relevant or complementary or similar goods and services. They can use your uniqueness as a rationale for the waiver. Okay, so they're capable of moving away from the required sources, but you have to have a good story to tell. So as small businesses, we should be thinking about how do we tell a story that gives the government a good story to tell to use as a waiver to move away from the required sources. Market research. I've said a couple of times it is so critical for small businesses to be a part of the market research activities. SAM.gov as a primary point of contact. There are also other GSA related entry points, eBuy, GSA eBuy, GSA Advantage. Okay. These are general government points of entry, SAM being the primary. Okay. But again, as GSA schedule buying increases, it has its own government point of entry, its own portal, its own way of publicizing, and they may or may not find their way to SAM. Okay. I have some data analysis colleagues, and they've ran some data that says routinely 35 to 40% of all procurements do not find their way to SAM.gov. They are being publicized in different methods. So on SAM, you're only seeing 65, 70, 75% of the procurements. That there's a large set of procurements that aren't being publicized on SAM. So where are they? And are you in the position to receive them? Other market research methods include RFIs and source of SALT, requests for information. These are the primary go-tos for government, the primary go-tos in terms of soliciting not only additional information to help mature the requirements, the asks, but also source of SALT looking for providers. Okay. So building a strategy that would allow you to effectively and efficiently respond to RFIs and source of SALT, that is a valuable thing to have. That's a valuable capability to create, that it allows you to be effective, because the goal is to participate. At the RFI and source of SALT stage, the goal is participation. Okay. Oral quotes and simplified synopsis. These are also strategies, especially at the simplified acquisition procedures threshold. Okay. Lots of ways, lots of strategies. And I believe when you think about all of the pressures that are happening on federal government acquisition in the acquisition environment, employees leaving, contracts being terminated, but the demand signals are still there. Okay. Whenever I have an opportunity to talk about it, I try to make this point. There are only two thus far in all of the executive order activity. There are only two lines of business, two areas of mission that have been terminated, that the demand has been terminated. Okay, now, we're not talking about the contracts, but the demands, and we're going to stop doing these things: DEI and DEI related activity and foreign aid. Those are the only two areas where the government has said, the administration said, we're just not going to do that anymore. Now, so all the other work where the contracts were removed, where the contracts were terminated or turned off or allowed to die, allowed to expire, a significant amount of that demand is still there. There's stuff that needs to be done. So I think that there's going to be an opportunity here. Okay, we're right around the corner to the fourth quarter. Right around the corner. When I was in government, I used to call this the third month. June was the third month. Third month of the third quarter. Okay. It was the get ready season. This was the time where it was, okay, it's time to start preparing for the fourth quarter. And I think this fourth quarter is going to have outsized chaos. I believe it. Okay, you can't. It's going to be hard to remove people from the system, remove contractors from the system, not remove a lot of the work from the system, and then still have that work needs to get done. So I think there are going to be opportunities. Going to use lots of leveraging of technology, but I think simplified strategies are going to be the way. Simplified strategies to small businesses are going to be the way that the government survives and get through the fourth quarter. Vendor outreach events and industry days. I'm seeing a lot more industry days, a lot less vendor outreach events. Many of the organizations that had small business offices, many of them have diminished in size. Okay, so I see a fewer outreach events happening that were led by agency, small business offices, small business utilization offices. But industry days are still happening. So in your business, in your lane, wherever your line of business is, making sure you are aware and tuned in to what outreach efforts are occurring and making sure that you're participating in them. Keywords. I mentioned keywords when we were talking about NAICS codes, but your NAICS codes, the combo platter between your keywords and your NAICS code, especially in your dynamic small business search, is really important. Understanding the two of those, and allowing your business to be seen and understood by those that are using the dynamic small business search to do market research. Another important piece is performance locations. Now, for knowledge work, performance location is almost an agnostic situation. We don't care where the person is doing the work. But for some services, and specifically construction, where location matters, it's really important that you talk about the places where you do work. Okay, as we are here in Virginia, someone's doing construction work or public works, utilities work, they may not be recruiting or may not be interested in recruiting individuals from Utah. Okay. Usually, they'll be looking for someone that is geographically close. Okay. So having that information in your dynamic business search profile is important. And then the ability to identify patterns, pattern matching. It's looking through the various platforms like SAM.gov and USAspending.gov. Those places, depending on your agencies, your target agencies, you should be able to look in the data and see if there are identified patterns. Okay? One of the things that I'm doing right now, and we're sharing with our community, is going looking in the fourth quarter data from last year. What purchases happened in the fourth quarter last year for your target agencies? It's too big to look at the whole of government in the fourth quarter because it is historically 40% of the spending in the year happens in fourth quarter. Okay. 40% of the spending of the year happens in the last 25% of the year. So for your 2, 3, 4 key agencies that you are targeting, it might make some sense to go dig into the numbers, dig into the data, and see what they bought last year, especially for micro purchase and simplified acquisition procedures, because most simplified acquisition procedures tend to be 1 year or 2 year contracting activity. Is the rarity that a 5-year contract for just about anything is $250,000 or less. So if it's 1 year activity and they awarded it last fiscal year's fourth quarter, guess what? There's an opportunity for it to be renewed in this year's fourth quarter, 12 months later. Okay, so that's how you use the data to help you identify not only your keywords, but position and market yourself effectively in the marketplace to be seen when the government is looking. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about purchase cards, because purchase cards are under the simplified acquisition threshold. Okay, it has its own threshold, but the value proposition here is that there is connective tissue between the micro purchase threshold and the next level up. When you're doing micro purchase activity, you can start planting the seeds that will sprout simplified acquisition activity. You do something that's $9,000 and you wow their socks off, and they're like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. What's next? Well, the next level threshold up is in the simplified acquisition threshold. So that's where you now have the opportunity to have connective tissue between your micro purchases and your simplified. So they work together, in my opinion. The way I think about it, that we use the government purchase card buying, micro purchase buying to seed simplified acquisition buying in the future. Okay, so give you a sense of what that looks like. Last year, Last year, $27 billion flowed through the government purchase cards. Okay. You can look from the stats who the big players are. Not surprising. But $27 billion, over 20 million transactions. Now here's a number that's going to be that is we should highlight. At the end of 2024, there were over 700,000 cardholders. Okay. So we can't forget the elephant in the room, that the 30-day card freeze, coupled with significant number of card cancellations and cards that have been set their limits to $1. The last count that I saw, the last Doge count that I saw, was a reduction of 100,000 purchase cards. Okay, a lot of other cards, fleet cards and travel cards. Also, those are the three parts, the three cards that are in the card program: fleet, travel, and purchase card. The one that we were focusing on today is the purchase card. Last Doge count was 100,000, right at 100,000 cards. So let's do that math. From 700,000 to 600,000. That's still a lot of cards. That's still a lot of customers. Okay, a lot of buying. And again, that $27 billion, just doesn't go away because some cards are lost or are turned off. Okay, so we think there's an opportunity. There's still an opportunity here. So when you're thinking about that, some strategies. Let's get tactical here for a second. Understanding the government's needs, you have to be able to have a sense of what the government is buying. Okay, at the simplified acquisition threshold, those will be publicized somewhere. At the micro purchase, they aren't publicized, but you can draw some conclusions from the mission of the agency, what they may be buying. Okay. Pricing strategies specifically for micro purchases, just understand that $10,000 is your cap for micros and $250,000 is your cap for simplified. Simplified procedures. In this space, you should be thinking about designing your offers so that they can be easily used, that they can be easily purchased. Okay, and again, thinking about micro purchases as connective tissue and seeds. You're growing connective tissue to your larger simplified acquisition purchases. Marketing to government buyers, letting people know you exist. Letting people know you exist. Outbound marketing is a good strategy. Letting people know that you have not only a government, you take the government purchase card, but that you are a small business and that you are ripe and ready for simplified acquisitions. Speed and efficiency. This activity goes fast. It's designed to go fast. So be prepared for the speed and efficiency of purchasing in the simplified threshold. Quality and reliability. Making sure the government can ascertain your quality and reliability in terms of bringing goods and services to the marketplace. I'm a never one that says lead with your small and disadvantaged business size and your status. Okay, I'm not a fan of leading with certifications. I believe in leading with capability. Certifications come separate. However, in the simplified environment, the small criteria leads, because that's the key that gets you into this area, being small. So letting people know you're small by your NAICS code, by your size standards, letting them know you're small. And then follow with capability. Eventually, you may get to certifications, but lead with small. Networking relationships, it's still a networking relationship season. Government contracting is all about networking relationships. It's harder now. Let's just be honest. It's a little bit harder now. And that is primarily because of all of the kind of the chaos that's ensuing inside of the federal government and in the acquisition environment specifically. Okay. But if government contracting is a people business, then we have to do the things to connect with people. Connected services. I talked about that. Micro purchases have connective tissue to simplified. So using the two are the micro purchase is the bite-sized chunk. Think about I often call them the bite-sized candy bars. The micro purchases are the bite-sized candy bars that then lead to the purchasing of the 3-foot candy bar that they sell in Target at Christmas time. Okay. Individuals might not take a chance on the 3-foot candy bar until they've tried them. Okay. They may not like Snicker bars. They might not like big Reese cups. But if you give them a small one, try it out. Oh, these people know what they're doing. They understand our business. They understand our culture. They speak our language. They understand our mission. They're good partners. Then that's where the connective tissue to the next highest level goes. Making sure your trends, staying up with your trends and changes, and this is watching, being aware of all that's going on at the federal level. Okay, lots of activity, executive orders and associated activity, lots of activity there, but we got to be aware, stay aware. Customer communications, I would encourage you to think about increasing that. I'm a big believer that the best place to sell is to someone that has already purchased before, that you sold to before. Okay, so are you reaching out to your past customers? Okay, and letting them know you're here, you're still in the game, and you're interested in doing business in the fourth quarter, okay, which is a couple weeks away. And then flexibility, knowing that the world is just sand is shifting under our feet as government contractors, literally weekly. What does that look like? And be ready to pivot and adapt based on what you're seeing and feeling and hearing in the marketplace. All right, let's talk a couple of next steps as we wrap up, and then we'll have open up for some question time. One of the things I've seen the value in, not only on the government side of the house, but also now as a government contractor, is having a tailored capability statement, hyper focused on simplified acquisition procedures, especially for small businesses. There is no cap on the number of capability statements you can have. Okay, so you can have as many as you want, but I would have one that is hyper focused on simplified acquisition procedures. Work that you've done below the simplified acquisition threshold. Work you've done at the micro purchase level threshold. All that information, hyper capable, so hyper focused capability statements. So when the government is thinking about simplified acquisitions, it's like, oh, I got someone that understands the language and is marketing themselves as someone capable of doing work at this threshold. Nothing wrong with, and you should have one for larger than SAP for the unrestricted, but you should have a SAP-centric capability statement. Pricing for speed. Okay, when we're thinking about fourth quarter, complexity should not be a part of your fourth quarter strategy. Transparent pricing, simplified terms and conditions, letting the government know you take the card, and that you are a pro SAT, simplified acquisition threshold provider. In addition, think about offering pricing discounts, volume discounts, okay, at this level, or some connective tissue to the next level up. That if you buy at this level, you get 10% off the next thing. Okay. Volume discounts and connective tissue to your pricing, whatever the next level up activity is. Because if you wow the crowd, you knock their socks off, the government is not going to change horses. They're going to oh, what else you got? And we do this. This is a strategy we use quite often. We do the pilot program. We do a pilot training, a pilot workshop. And then with the pilot workshop, you get 10. When you buy more, you get volume discounts. You do the pilot for one. If you buy three, you get 10% off three, or you get four for the price of three. But once you leave the micro purchasing, you're well in your way into operating in the simplified acquisition threshold, which you got lots of room. $10,001 all the way up to $250,000. You got lots of room to build offers and create value, unlock and create value for the government. Build relationships. Okay. Be mindful that the card holder in most agencies is not the contracting officer. So your small business offices, card holders that are in program offices, end user representative, projects, cores, those are the folks that you should be thinking about and talking to. Your industry days and matchmaking, that's another opportunity to talk to end users, program personnel. I'm speaking as a former contracting officer. So many people have this perception that, oh, I can go talk to the contracting. I need to go talk to the contracting officer. The contracting officer does not make that decision. The contracting officer does not make the decision of how to go into the market. Okay, that's a team activity that is influenced greatly by the programs. Contracting officer has a role to play, so I'm not diminishing the role to play, but a direct conversation with the contracting officer is not going to get you that far. Because the contracting officer cares about the effectiveness of the acquisition process. I call it the turn of the crank. Okay. The contracting officer cares, did we put good stuff in the top and did we turn the crank well? Whatever comes out of the bottom is what it is, because we maintain the sanctity of the process. Contracting officer doesn't necessarily care about the inputs. They care about the process. So if you want to talk inputs, your program officers, project officers, cores, small business offices, end users, those are the individuals that care about the inputs. Make sure we get good people in the process to run the race. Contracting officer is the keeper of the rules. Okay, and they're holding the stopwatch to make sure who crosses the finish line first, not who was allowed to run the race. Okay, so just be mindful of that when you're building your relationships. To give you a sense of the small business participation, we talk about this often, but there's been some changes. Small disadvantaged business moved from a 15% target last year back to what has historically been the target, which is 5%. Women owned is 5%. Hub Zone 3%. Still seems to be the hardest to achieve by government agencies. When you look at the stats, that's why I think, and Hub Zone is geography based. That's why I think it's going to get some extra energy behind it. And services enabled veteran-owned small businesses moved from 3 to 5. The change from 3 to 5 happened last fiscal year, but it was not codified in the goals across government. It is now codified in the goals. Okay, it's identified and articulated in the goals for each government agency. 5% services able veteran-owned small businesses. So there's going to be some energy around that shift as well. And please remember that agencies have individual small business prime and subcontracting goals, both small business prime and small business subcontracting goals. So even the dollars that go to large businesses often have small business subcontracting goals in them. When the government looks at and thinks about simplified acquisition thresholds, they usually do it in two ways from a source selection perspective. Trade-offs is the balance between how much the government is interested in paying and the technical capability it's willing to achieve. It's a trade-off. Okay. price and non-price factors, and there's a balance. There's a trade-off. The government will make those trade-offs. An alternative approach is the low price technically acceptable. Okay? Not a fan personally, but you got to know what it is. So when you're faced with it, when you see it being publicized, you know what to do. Okay. Lots of times when the LPTA strategy is used, it's for commercial goods and services, things that are routine. There's not a plan. No one's looking for a plan. It's just, is it technically acceptable? Is the thing we're acquiring technically acceptable? And then it shifts to second grade math. What number is less than or equal to another? Okay. These are the two strategies. So you want to make sure you know, how is the government evaluating doing the source selection? How are they picking the winner? Are they willing to make some trade-offs? In a trade-off, are they seeking to pursue quality? The pursuit of quality is available in a low price, technically acceptable environment. The pursuit of quality, of additional quality, is not even available. One hurdle, is it technically acceptable? And then second grade math. All right, I think we did it. Here's the things we want to talk about: understanding acquisition procedures, simplified acquisition procedures, talking about how SAP procurements accelerate small business entry. Okay, value proposition, it's an open door. It's an open door with reduced burden, reduced oversight, reduced paperwork, and then demonstrate some tactics to pursue simplified acquisition procedures. We talked about marketing and branding. We talked about using micro purchases as connective tissue. We talked about having a dedicated SAP capability statement. Okay, and then reading the tea leaves, looking at what's happening in the environment and seeing where demand is going, and then looking backwards, look at last year's fourth quarter to see if there's something that can be drawn, some conclusions that can be drawn for activity in this fourth quarter. All right. And with that, we'll be ready to open it up for questions. I want to give my last slide where you can get some point of contact information. So if you're on LinkedIn, I welcome the opportunity to connect with you on LinkedIn. And my email and telephone number is attached. And we're also building an advisory and coaching community school, SKOOL. It's a type of online membership. The memberships are free in the month of June. So if you're interested in hearing more about how we're figuring out this thing called government contracting in this new environment, we welcome the opportunity to join us and help us. We're going to crowdsource this thing. We're going to win as a community. So thank you for that. And at this point, I will open it up for questions, comments.
All right, William, thank you so much for your time. We had a few questions come in, so let's get to it. First question is there such a thing as small business hub zone set-asides?
Yes, it is. First is the hub zone is a small business. That's a characteristic of a small business. So that's a flavor of small business. They're not hub zone large businesses. Okay. Or at least if they are large businesses in hub zones, they don't get any preferential treatment. They don't get any treatment in terms of applying against the socioeconomic goals, the 3% annual goal. So large businesses can reside in hub zones, but to get the preferential treatment for set-asides, you have to be a small business in a hub zone.
All right, the next question is, what is the authoritative source for the dollar amount for micro purchase and simplified acquisition values?
The authoritative source. Those are identified in the FAR. The federal both of those definitions are identified in the FAR, and then They are routinely every 3 or 4 years. They are routinely inflationary indexed.
Another person was wondering if you could repeat the dollar figure you predict will go towards the GSA schedule and the MAS.
Oh, sure, yes. Um, this has been publicly. This is not a prediction. I don't want to claim it as a prediction of mine. This is the guidance that has been put out by GSA. I've gone to a couple of their webinars, been members of a couple of their webinars where they put out the number 400 million based on last year's common goods and services. There's a concept called category management that GSA uses, that the government uses wide. Category management. There are 10 categories, and it's everything from um, administrative services all the way to IT and security, transportation. It's 10 of them. When you take the spend in those 10 that are common, the estimate is 400 billion. And all of that is moving to, or has moved, or in the process of moving, where into GSA for execution.
All right, William, that's all the questions I have for now. So if anyone has a
Oh,
question for William, please put it in that Q&A box. And while you're thinking of that, I just want to let everyone know that I sent out a feedback survey, so that if you could kindly fill that out and send it back to us. And it is all anonymous, so please fill that out. Let us know how we're doing or any type of subject matters that you would like to see the Apex Accelerator do here in the future. And also, if you enjoyed today's class with, excuse me, with William, he'll be back with us in August, and he's going to be doing a webinar called Creating Compelling RFI and Sources Sought Notice Responses. And you can register for that right now on our website. So please go take a look. There's a few more in the queue for him, so check those out and see if they work for you. And again, if you have any questions, put them in that Q&A. Otherwise, we'll wrap up here shortly. Oh, and looks like a question came in for you, William. Are there
okay.
specific items that will be redirected to GSA, and are they on the ITMAS?
Redirected 10 categories. Yes. So when you think about category management, all you have to do is look up GSA category management, and you will see on GSA's website, you'll see the 10 categories that they manage. All of those 10, all of them are moving to GSA. Now they had some representation in some of them, but previously they were being managed by different agencies. DHS had one for security, led security. I think VA led pharmaceuticals, and DOD had one for, I think DOD was the lead for transportation. Okay, so the nuanced pieces of those, meaning those that are highly specialized for those three agencies, they're going to retain those pieces. But the pieces that were common are going into the common pot. And the common pot, again, is 400 billion. The last video said GSA needed to increase its staffing by 4x to be able to accommodate to do all the work. And my argument, or at least here's a premonition on my part, is that I think they will have to use the schedules to do that activity. When you think about 400 billion coming into the organization, and a significant portion of that was done by all the other government agencies. Now that's coming in, and they need to. When you say I've got to quadruple my workforce, that just says that they're expecting to do a lot of work that they hadn't previously done. And as a result of that, I think the schedules are going to be the tool, or at least one of the tools. They're going to have the GWACs, the government-wide acquisition vehicles, available to them. But I think the schedules are going to take the lion's share, or it's going to be the greatest. When they look into the tool bag, I think today, especially in the short amount of time it is between now and fourth quarter, today they're going to use the tools that they have available, and I think the schedules are going to be it. So If you're on schedules, I think bravo. If you're thinking about schedules, that's a good strategy. If you haven't been thinking about schedules, which I was one of those that said, hey, I the open market works just fine for the business that we do, but we are, we can't bury our heads in the sand. When you look at all the pieces that are moving, the conclusion you come to is, oh, okay, GSA schedules is going to be a significant portion of that spend is going to be going through the schedules. And if you don't have a schedule, you won't get invited to see it, much less compete on it. In my opinion, I'll add that at the end. In my opinion.
Thanks, William. I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment that came in that said, thank you for your time and the sharing of your knowledge and experience. And
My
again, if you have a
pleasure.
question, put in that Q&A for William. We have a few more minutes here. If not, I
Thank
will
you.
wrap up here soon.
I thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, to be engaged with you. I think this is a area that is ripe for it's designed for small businesses, and but I don't see the focus on it that I think that it should happen that should be happening on it in the community from a preparation from an agency, excuse me, from a industry and company perspective. There's lots of people out there and companies that'll gladly take $10,000 or $15,000 of your money to teach you how to win $5 million contracts, and it's like that's hard, And I've always believed that you know you have to grow into that activity, that if the person that comes out and automatically gets a $10 million contract, I wonder if they've built the muscles, they've gone into the gym and built the muscles to be able to effectively execute that. It's a crawl, walk, run, fly model, and I think the simplified acquisition area and even the micro purchasing area are good places to get your crawl, walk, and run down. So then when it's time to fly on some bigger things, you've built the muscles that allows you to fly. So thank you for the opportunity to share this, and please feel free to reach out. And welcome to connect with any of you in any way possible.
Looks like we have one more question come in. Could you share the GSA eBuy and alternative posting locations we may be able to find opportunities that will not make it to sam.gov?
Yeah, so eBuy for the smaller ones, micro purchases kind of live there. It's one strategy, but again, you have to have a GSA schedule in order to be represented on GSA eBuy. So that's another reason why it's like, oh, okay, if I want to be seen by the government, where do I do that? So eBuy is for the smaller dollar value. GSA Advantage is the next level up, and GSA Advantage and eBuy run their own publicizing based on your membership in the GSA schedules. So if you're a schedule holder, you get access to them, and they get sent to you routinely. I get a couple. I'm a partner with the folks. The way I've done GSA, a way I've adopted GSA scheduling or GSA schedule opportunities in the past is I'm a strategic partner with someone that has a schedule. So I'm on their schedule. When the notifications come out, I get to see the emails, and they come out. Never make it to SAM. So eBuy, smaller dollar, GSA Advantage, larger dollar value schedules, and then there are other areas. Sometimes different organizations may have their own platforms, but those are the three: SAM, GSA Advantage, and then eBuy are probably the three primary places. But again, 25 to 30% don't make it to SAM, so you've got to make sure you are understanding where are they going based on your spend, your next, based on your demands, your next codes, your lines of business. Where are they? Where are those requirements going? And you want to make sure you're aligned and tapped into those.
Another comment. This is very helpful. Thank you for the clarification. Again, you have a question, give it over to William. Just put it in that Q&A. We have a few more minutes before we wrap up here.
We are in the third third month. So I encourage you to think about it in that context. It's like, how do we prepare ourselves for an ever-changing environment? Um, there's a few things I call government contracting survival tactics, survival in the season, because it feels like it's a survival. It's a survival season. We got to survive this season as it morphs and evolves. So there's some survival tactics, that I think people should be thinking about. Number one is turn every rock. Every opportunity, every person you talk to should be an opportunity to have a conversation about who you are, what you do, what you've done, and who you've done it for. Okay, that's a conversation to have with everybody you meet. I had a conversation, and where this hit me right in the front of the head was I was having a conversation at church about 3 weeks ago, with someone I met, and they said, "Hey, so what do you do?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a government contractor. It's a little slow in the government contractor space," and they worked at the in law enforcement at the city level. And it's like, "Oh, we'd love to, let's have a conversation with you about doing some leadership training for us." I was like, "Oh." It just dawned on me. It's like, oh, at every opportunity, if you got to tell people who you are, you got to almost put a button on that says, I'm a government contractor. This is who I do. So we're well on our way of landing some work for local law enforcement, simply by me opening my mouth at church and saying, talking in a small group and telling people who I was, what I do, when I've done it, who I've done it for, and open to other opportunities. So take advantage. Take advantage.
Another question came in. 1 second. Do you recommend getting a consultant to help you expand your GSA schedule? We are on it, and it was a heavy lift because GSA dropped the ball, but based on your input today, it might make sense to expand. I wanted to know your thoughts on this.
So yes, I think expansion. So here's the journey. Existence. If you're not present, get present. So you have to be existent. If you're existing, then put some time and effort into making your schedule as marketable and relevant as possible. Um, do you need to have a consultant to do that? Um, it depends. If you have the time and energy and the wherewithal to wrestle that alligator yourself, and it is indeed an alligator, make no mistake, it's an alligator. So if you have the wherewithal to wrestle the alligator yourself, have the time, have the capacity to do that, then I would say, yeah, go ahead and do it yourself. If you don't have the time, meaning your time is your highest and best use is somewhere else, and that's actually revenue generating activity, okay, then I would say, yeah, go get you a consultant, okay, because your time is better spent being in revenue generating activities. Um, that's a lesson that I had to learn I was a W-2 employee from I was 17 years old. So it's like you learn how to be a W-2 employee. It's like, oh, the eagle flies every 2 weeks, every payday. And then at some point you say, when you make that transition into entrepreneurship, you realize that you got to sing for your supper every day, and that there are some highest and best use of your time, and that depending on if you're a one-person shop wearing all the hats or you got a small team, there are some highest and best use of your time. So I would do an assessment. So the long and short answer to that is it depends. The goal is to get it done. So if you have the capacity, time, energy, wherewithal to do it, and you're not sacrificing revenue generating activities for your time to do it, do it. If you know if your time is everybody's occupied and you can't break away, but that activity is revenue generating, then yeah, go get your consultant. They're not cheap. I'm telling you, they're not cheap. I have a couple that I work with that are affordable, but none of them are cheap. And I think this is an area where you don't want cheap. I've learned in 30 years of this business on all sides of the government contracting table is that most times we get exactly what we pay for. Exactly. Okay. It is the rarity that you get the outsized value for the least amount of investment. most of the time, and that's just like 9.5 times out of 10, we get exactly what we pay for. So my number, my point of contact information is there. I've got a person that I'm using, and that I've known for a long time, but now that I'm pursuing, I'm this person that's helping me. So just reach out, send me a note, connect on LinkedIn, send me a direct message. Actually, LinkedIn might be better because I can just connect you right on LinkedIn to the person. Um, but yeah, I think it's in this season. I think this is the play. I think this is the play.
All right, William, with that, I'm going to wrap up today's webinar. Thank you so much for your time.
My
Always
pleasure.
invaluable. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope everyone has a great rest of their afternoon, or we'll see you later in their next webinar today. All right, well, everyone have a good one, and we'll see you guys here soon.